Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Rodney Manzo, head of Anvyl for Sage. Rodney, thank you so much for joining me.
Brittany, thank you for having me.
Anvyl recently released their 2025 State of Supply Chain report, and this comes at a time full of uncertainty. President Donald Trump's global tariffs have completely shaken up international supply chains. Businesses around the world hang in the balance as we are about 1/3 of the way through the 90-day temporary pause when it comes to reciprocal tariffs. Nations around the world are negotiating with the United States to come up with some sort of tariff deal. So I'm curious what the report found in regards to the current state of the global supply chain.
I just want to acknowledge the pain of global supply chains that they're seeing today with tariffs. I spent my career at Apple, at Harry's Grooming, working with global suppliers around the world. So I'm very intimate in that. And here at Anvyl and at Sage, we have thousands of suppliers around the world that are feeling the impacts. So the state of supply chain is very, very timely. A couple things I think that surprised me around that was, number one, 20% of brands now feel extremely confident in their ability to address things. 21%. That is extremely, extremely low. You look on the flip side, that means that they don't know what's happening. They don't know what they can do. They don't know what to do.
And I want to talk about that number. The 21% of brands feel extremely confident in handling disruptions from tariffs. So that means on the flip side, only 79% of companies do not feel confident. What do you make of those numbers? Dive in a little deeper there for us.
Yeah, Brittany, I think it's years of changes and pain. It's not just today. If you look at issues around logistics, whether it's issues in the Suez Canal, Panama Canal, disruptions across, moving from direct sourcing into retail, all these changes are just coming to a tip. And what you have within these tariffs, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to react. And what you see is a pause. And that pause is creating, I think, a lot of issues that consumers will start seeing nowadays because they're pausing to figure out what to do, but also how their businesses are going to change from these tariffs.
And if suppliers are feeling that pause, if they're starting to pause because they're uncertain of what to do, I mean, how soon after then will consumers feel that pause?
Yeah. What I look at, I go back to my academic days when I was studying supply chain. And what I see is this is a classic bullwhip effect. So what you have is the first tariffs announcement. So what happens? People pause ordering goods across the globe because they're worried about their margins or costs being corroded. That means suppliers' productions halts. They're not ordering, so suppliers don't produce products. Then you have delayed inventory replenishment, whether it's in retail or in your warehouses. Then maybe demand will spike. But what happens then, you don't have capacity on vessels. You don't have inventory where it should be. And when that happens, you get delays, you can get congestion or stockouts. And as you can imagine, when COVID hit and you could not buy toilet paper, you could see very similar things today.
I'm curious, COVID was, if you could believe it, the brunt of it was 5 years ago. Are there any lessons that brands are learning, have learned 5 years ago in COVID that they're implementing now? Or is it completely different? Is it like comparing apples and oranges because this is one person's tariff policy causing this global chaos versus an international global pandemic?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of lesson learned and things that supply chains did to react to that probably you see in our state of supply chain survey. So number one is that they had risk exposure and they put a lot of protocols in place to not have that exposure. So 78% of the brands responded that they consider supplier location and sourcing the top issue, top focus. And that's been the same thing since COVID to today. They continue to do that. So they're looking at other supplier locations with their current suppliers, second sourcing with new suppliers, or even near or onshoring. So it's a similar theme, and they've been doing things since COVID to today.
I want to talk more about the report and what you found, how businesses are responding to this uncertainty. Aside from pausing, they're not sure what to do. I mean, what are some of those next steps that people are taking?
Yeah. Another thing that came out, we're Sage and Anvyl, we're supply chain technologies. And when you hear things, such small brands actually are still using manual processes, which is 43%. So you can imagine somebody's ordering goods off of a spreadsheet, an email, or a Word document. Think about the issues that happen if you're doing that. You send a PDF or something over to someone, you have no control, you have no idea what's happening. So what brands are doing today, they're looking at digitization. They're digitizing and making the supply chain more resilient, strong with data, with information, with AI, where a human like myself, when I was at Apple, I'd be picking up the phone, I'd be going around the world seeing what was happening on the factory floor. That's just not how you can operate today.
I think something that people and consumers in general are really concerned about is that they think tariffs equal higher prices. And with tariffs, you're also going to see lower disposable income, says many economists, most of whom I've talked to. So how is pricing impacted? What did the report find there?
Yeah, Brittany, what we see in real life, a lot of our brands reacting to it in a few ways. So what they're doing is they're changing their price on their website. They're either eating the price with their suppliers, or you don't see anything, or they're just really pausing. So there's a mixture of those things that are happening. So it's just really brand dependent. So we work with everyone from Procter and Gamble on down, and there will be all different strategies throughout. So it's really hard to say one thing is working or one kind of solutions in place when there are just so many really here today combating tariffs.
I'm curious, as we said, this time is plagued by uncertainty. So when there's uncertainty, there's oftentimes a lot of risk. How are companies managing and mitigating this risk in this time right now?
They're investing in training, they're investing in technology, and they're investing in getting closer to their suppliers. And those three things make a more resilient supply chain. And it's really critical that you do that constantly. When I was at Harry's, the first thing I went in when I started, I looked at the entire supply chain map. I looked at risk, I looked at exposure, I looked at second sourcing, costs, everything. And we did that every single year, over and over again, to assess, do we have something that's resilient to what's happening within the current market conditions? And that just continues to be the case today.
The report also found that supplier diversification, as it said, is no longer optional in 2025. Can you talk to us about that, and what does that mean exactly for businesses?
Yeah, if you have one supplier in China and you have over 100% tariffs, that solution's just not going to be compelling for you or your customers or your business. Either you're going to shut down, you're not going to produce product, or you're going to have to look at diversification, which we saw in the survey. So we see diversification a few ways. Number one, we see Chinese suppliers that are moving outside of China. They'll go to Malaysia, they'll go to Taiwan, they'll go to other countries to produce goods. The second thing is they're looking at different suppliers completely. Can you bring that back into the US? Maybe. Can you do it maybe in Mexico where the tariffs are not as high? So we're seeing different strategies around there across the supply chain. But I can tell you, sourcing and procurement for professionals, they never stop. And they just continue to overcome challenge after challenges. And really, at the end of the day, that's their job.
So I'm curious right now because the United States is currently in negotiations with dozens of nations. That's what the Trump White House is saying. Are suppliers going to go to places that have the best trade deals, the most favorable trade deals with the United States? Because right now, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent today, on Tuesday, said that as of now, the United States has not engaged in tariff negotiations with China. China, as we know, has by far the highest tariffs. So is that bad news for Chinese suppliers? What exactly does that look like?
When I look at that, you have to look at how products are made. And products are made not with cost. They're made with infrastructure. They're made with tooling. They're made with capabilities. They're made with manufacturing. And just because the tariff is X doesn't mean it's actually cheaper to move outside or into another country. It actually could be more. If you look at Asia, the minimum wage is under $5 an hour. You obviously know the minimum wage in the US. It's really hard to overcome things like that. But you have to look at every aspect from the very beginning of the supply chain all the way till it's delivered to see if you would actually move to another location, because maybe it doesn't make sense at all.
When it comes to President Trump's approach to trade and tariff policy, it's been described as new rules of the road for international trade. So what exactly do you think that means for U.S. brands?
Yeah, in general and broadly, we saw 59% of brands struggle for visibility. And that visibility could be cost, it could be production, it could be logistics, but they struggle with visibility across their supply chain. Tariffs are just another issue of visibility. They don't know how it's going to impact their costs, they don't impact demand, so it's just another issue. So with that lack of visibility across the supply chain because of it being very manual, what we see is brands doing a few things. And I think these are smart strategies. The first, ERP integrations. They're integrating their ERPs across all different tools, whether it's Sage, whether it's competing products. They're making that a main hub and bringing a best in breed around that. The next, they have real-time dashboards. So you know when the issues are occurring and the risks associated with those issues. Again, whether it's a tariff or Suez Canal, you see that in real time, so you can more effectively. And lastly, you're being AI forecasting and predictions in place. So if you can forecast disruptions and changes, let's say if the Suez Canal, just using that again, is shut down, you might ship via air instead of put it on a vessel that's going to get backlogged in the Suez Canal. And AI can do that for you.
When it comes to President Trump's tariffs, there have been a lot of concern about unintended consequences or perhaps ripple effects. I'm curious just how far-reaching you think those ripple effects are and how long-lasting this is. I mean, is the holiday season going to be impacted? What exactly does that look like?
Yeah, it goes back to the bullwhip effect that I was mentioning, where there's really in holidays, if you look at that, the Black Friday, November through December is a major, major time to bring in all of your product. We got word that, Target is no longer going to have holiday goods in theirs from their direct suppliers. So you can see they're shifting their strategies because they don't want to have high cost product on their shelves with their brands. So they're going to have different products in store for the holidays. But there's an unknown. Do I order too much now that's not going to sell, that I'm going to have overstock? Or do I not order at all enough where it's out of stock and I don't make the margins I expect? So it's a very, very difficult time for the holidays and knowing what truly you need to do to be successful.
As someone who's an expert in this field, supply chains, what do you think is missing really from the international dialogue when it comes to President Trump's tariff policies and the negotiations and the fallout thereafter?
Yeah, it's a very hard conversation if you're just looking at one data point in tariffs. I think you need to break down the entire supply chain. The first tier, the second tier, the third tier of your supply chain. Who are you working with logistically? How are you moving goods? And holistically look at that picture. Because the tariff piece is one aspect of many, and it may not actually do what you expect it to do. That's the first thing. The second thing is realistically, what are you going to bring into the US? What could we do? What could we produce? And there's things that we just can't. We don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the capabilities. And so why would we want to impact those things if we're never actually going to bring them into the US? So it's a very difficult conversation, but there's multiple things to look at to see if just pure tariffs is the right move.
I think that brings up a really interesting point because President Trump said America has been taken advantage of for years. We've been ripped off for decades, and these tariffs are a good opportunity to reprioritize domestic manufacturing and put America first. Based on the report, based on what you're seeing around this impact to the supply chain, do you think that this is the solution to putting America first? Is this putting America first?
At Sage, we're truly committed to supporting our SMBs, mid-market brands, and make it easier for them to grow, easier to scale. And we're putting them first, and we always have put them first. What I would say is it's not an easy conversation or direct answer. And it's not going to do what we expect it to do at the end of the day. Because there's just so many capabilities and different dynamics that just a pure number is not going to change.
Well, there is certainly a lot of developments to look out for as we continue the tariff talk. Rodney Manzo, thank you so much for joining me. You are welcome back anytime.
Thank you, Brittany. Really, really excited to be here, and thank you for your time.